Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Andrew Chief. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a research fellow here at the Institute. And let me welcome you all to our first Africa session of 2020. Today's Africa session will focus on Rwanda. After the 1994 genocide, Rwanda embarked on a journey of transformation through innovative homegrown solutions. In 2000, President Paul Kagame launched Vision 2020, a governmental development program designed to push Rwanda and its people forward. Vision 2020's objective was to transform the country into a knowledge-based, middle-income country, thereby reducing poverty and enhancing unity and democracy. Since then, Rwanda has gone on to accomplish great success. Rwanda's macroeconomic performance under the IMF program remains strong. Growth continues to beat expectation, averaging 10.3% in the first half of 2019, all supported by a strong and booming construction, services and agricultural sector. This year, Rwanda will also host the 26th Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, also known as CHOGM, after joining as the 54th member in 2009. While the referendum was held in 2015 to extend the president's time in power until 2034, parliamentary elections in 2018 saw women fill 61.5% of seats and two opposition parties winning 2 seats in parliament. However, Rwanda has and still is dealing with some challenges. The relationship with neighbouring Uganda has worsened, leading to border closures and both sides accusing each other of supporting rebel groups. Armed groups are still operational between the border with the DRC, and it is claimed that political opposition leaders have been intimidated, arrested or forced into exile. I'm delighted to have with us today Her Excellency Yamina Karitanyi, who will outline and address Rwanda's economic success and strategic position in Africa ahead of CHOGM. Her Excellency has been High Commissioner for the Republic of Rwanda to the United Kingdom since 2015. She previously served as Minister Councillor in Kenya from August 2010. In May 2012, Her Excellency was appointed High Commissioner for the Republic of Rwanda to the Republic of Kenya. From April 2014, Her Excellency headed Rwanda's tourism and conservation portfolios at the Rwanda Development Board. This event will be on the record, so without further waiting, I'll hand the floor over to Her Excellency, and then we'll open the floor for a Q&A session. Her Excellency.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Chie, for inviting me to speak as part of the Africa sessions. It is a privilege to address all of you at this world-leading think tank and historic venue. I appreciate your presence and interest in Rwanda's journey and story. This afternoon, I wish to talk about Rwanda's economic transformation, and to start, I'll provide some context on where this journey began. Rwanda's inherited a varying history. After gaining independence in 1962 from Belgium, Rwanda was characterized by widespread discrimination and politics based on division and exclusion. Colonialism, for it to be effective, commanded that the colonizers divide communities to better rule over them. In essence, divide and rule was the strategy. What followed after independence allowed for the leadership of that time to focus on forging further division and hatred among its citizens. The results were catastrophic. It is that history that led to the 94 genocide against the Tutsi, in which more than 1 million perished. From 7th April 1994, my country experienced a terrible series of the most tragic and inhumane acts. Over 100 of the darkest days in our history, a well-planned genocide unfolded in front of the entire world. At international fora, where one would have hoped and expected sounding alarms to be deafening, we heard sophisticated conversations about what amounts to genocide, its definition, and whether it could be applied to the Rwandan situation. So when we speak about the genocide against the Tutsi, we rightly focus on the 1 million+ lost lives. but the damage was much more pronounced. We had a stagnated economy that had shrunk by 50%, a 64% inflation rate, a 78% poverty rate, an overwhelming number of displaced persons, more than 140,000 genocide suspects in overcrowded prisons. The entire socioeconomic fabric was destroyed, and the infrastructure was equally dilapidated. A complete restart was required, but we also had huge capacity gaps and weak institutional frameworks. 96% of our civil servants had no higher education. So the war was over. We needed a recipe for peace. How did we go about it? A series of development strategies were started, and Vision 2020 was implemented in three stages. Stage 1 focused on recovery from post-conflict, focusing on social sectors and starting to achieve slow rate of poverty reduction. The second stage focused on preparation for takeoff, with further focus on poverty reduction, reducing inequality, high growth, which reached 8.2%, and strong contribution to achieving Millennium Development Goals. The third stage, which is where we are right now, is a focus on further rapid growth, fast poverty reduction, and further reducing the poverty rate, which stands at about 35% as we speak. We also have a clear focus on closing the trade balance with higher export, increasing private sector investment. In essence, we have to sustain and further grow our economy. The government measures each of the stages, making necessary adjustments to ensure success using the Rwanda governance 8 pillars scorecard. Under the leadership of President Paul Kagame, Rwanda has become a reference point for good governance, political stability with well-functioning institutions, observance of the rule of law, and zero tolerance for corruption. Just last week, the President delivered a talk at King's College London where he highlighted three key pillars of the Rwandan mindset that has underpinned Rwanda's journey to where we are today. The first is urgency, because everything was a priority. The second is unity, because division nearly annihilated us. And lastly, self-reliance, mixed, of course, with a global outlook. With these pillars in mind, the first step along the path to rebuilding took the shape of innovative homegrown solutions. We looked inward and got inspired by our culture in order to manage the aftermath of the genocide. One of these homegrown solutions was Gacaca, our traditional court system, which offers restorative justice to victims of the genocide while allowing for healing and reconciliation within the communities. Had it not been for Gacaca, it would have taken us 160 years to try perpetrators if we were to rely on the overstretched and inadequate legal system. Yet, we needed to make strides which would allow for communities to start healing. Other homegrown solutions we rely on include Muganda, which is community work where millions of Rwandans come together once a month on the last Saturday of every month to clean up our communities. Kigali, Rwanda's capital, was voted the cleanest city in Africa, and Rwanda was ranked third greenest country in the world according to the World Travel Guide. The community action has been backed up by forward-thinking policies. For instance, in 2007, Rwanda became the first country in the world to legislate an outright ban on polythene bags. And in June last year, a law was passed banning single-use plastics, and we're in the process now of implementing that law. We've made great strides towards our ambitious goals. We're now second fastest growing economy in Africa. In 2018, the growth was 8.6%, and it rose to 10.8% in the first 3 quarters of 2019. Rwanda is second easiest country to do business in Africa, according to the World Bank Doing Business report. We're a member of both the East Africa Community and the Economic Community of Central African States. To attract investment and growth, we have adopted a liberal trade regime. Rwanda has access to global and African markets through strong free trade agreements with the East African Community, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, and on the international stage with the European Union, as well as the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act to serve the US market. We also offer the ability to open a business in under 6 hours and extend preferential corporate income tax for strategic sectors such as ICT. On ICT and innovation, I would like to take a moment to focus on ICT and innovation to demonstrate how the most important part of the economic progress we are making is the improvement to the lives of our citizens. It is key to ensure that citizens are part of the development process and that public policy directly benefits their lives. Rwanda is developing into a regional innovation and technology hub. A nationwide fiber optic internet rollout has seen over 7,000 of fiber cabling throughout the country. We are first in East Africa, in the East Africa Community for network readiness, fifth in Africa, and we now have 95% 4G network coverage. My internet works faster in Kigali than here. In October last year, the first made in Rwanda smartphone was launched, and also being the first smartphone made entirely in Africa. Rwanda aims to secure connectivity to all corners of the country and is introducing e-governance, smart agriculture, and e-health. One example of e-health is Babil Healthcare, an artificial intelligence-powered digital service that uses chatbots and phone consultations to diagnose health conditions and prescribe medicines. Some of you may already be familiar with Babil Health. It is a UK-based company that is behind this solution, and Rwanda was the first country to trial their product outside of the UK. Many people living in rural areas would have to take long journeys to reach a medical practitioner with no guarantee of an appointment. And now over 2 million Rwandans have registered on Babil, and the company has stated they are taking an average of 1,000 consultations per day. Rwanda is committed to universal healthcare, and coverage now stands a little over 90%, with the average life expectancy going from 49 years in 2000 to 67 years today. Rwanda is also home to the world's first drone delivery port, set up by Silicon Valley startup Zipline. The drones rapidly deliver medical supplies and blood to remote areas that would typically take several hours to reach. And so our drones save lives. Through a dynamic legal and regulatory environment, Rwanda provides a safe environment for companies to develop and test their applications in a regulatory sandbox. But with investment in the ICT infrastructure and the membership in regional and international trading communities, Rwanda seeks and gladly opens its doors to innovators such as Zipline and Babil Health that can directly benefit the lives of citizens. Additionally, Alibaba also, in partnership with the government of Rwanda, established its electronic world trading platform, which has given an opportunity for our farmers to sell coffee directly into the Chinese market and saving or gaining an extra 25% because the middleman in essence has been sidelined. Rwanda has emerged as a leading proof of concept hub and is now the ideal base for creating, testing, and launching innovative technology-enabled solutions that can be scaled for the wider East African community and beyond. We are proud to be at the center of this transformational change in Africa. In July this year, the world's largest new free trade area will become operational in Africa, covering nearly the entire continent. That is the Continental Free Trade Area. And Rwanda has made ample preparations in readiness for this new era by investing in building capacities to drive trade and attract investment. Just last week, the World Bank and Rwanda launched the first Rwandan franc-denominated bond to be listed at the London Stock Exchange. The governor of the Central Bank of Rwanda and representatives from the World Bank carried out the market close ceremony at the London Stock Exchange, celebrating this launch. The bond will contribute to the development of the local capital market, provide an opportunity for international investors to purchase a World Bank bond while gaining exposure to the growing Rwandan economy. The implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area will see Rwanda gain access to a larger market in Africa on ideal terms by exporting and importing duty-free from more African countries. We've been pushing to increase local production through the Made in Rwanda initiative, and the agreement presents a huge opportunity for Rwanda to access this market of 1.2 billion, whilst also demonstrating a solid political will in Africa for a deeper regional integration agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, another way our government invested and continues to invest in our citizens is through education, society's greatest equalizer. Rwanda is home to 4 of the continent's top STEM 1 universities, namely Carnegie Mellon International Center for Theoretical Physics, the Africa Leadership University, and the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences. We also have the highest brain gain in Africa, whereas other countries are losing their citizens to leave to look for greener pastures abroad. I am proud to belong to a country which is welcoming its citizens back home from all backgrounds and inviting them to join us on our journey to make Rwanda truly remarkable. We are developing a skilled and educated workforce. 97% of school-going children in Rwanda are enrolled in schools, and literacy rates rose from 48% in 2000 to over 89% today, and we're also producing 50,000 higher education graduates every year. Over the last 2 decades, Rwanda's GDP has tripled, and we have graduated from a 95% reliance on foreign aid to about 16% today, as we understand that aid supports a nation and trade builds a nation. We have also consistently recorded the highest female representation in political decision-making over the past decade. Our parliament currently stands at 61.5% women, and the gender-balanced cabinet consists of 52% female ministers. And the quota stipulating that women must make up at least 30% of parliament and cabinet is enshrined in our constitution. Let me briefly touch on tourism and conservation. Tourism is our top foreign exchange earner, contributing significantly to our GDP and economic growth. Rwanda is home to the magnificent mountain gorillas, and we continue to offer a safe environment for them to thrive with conservation efforts and the utmost provision of care by the rangers and medical staff that look after these unique creatures. We've reintroduced lions and rhinos into one of our national parks. We have 4 national parks. Our tourism policy states that 10% of sales revenues from all touristic sites in Rwanda must be reinvested in the development of local communities living around these parks. A global leader in conservation and ecotourism, our unique partnership with Arsenal Football Club has showcased all the reasons to visit Rwanda, and through it, we are attracting an increasing number of people to visit and invest in Rwanda and to buy made in Rwanda products. In addition to Arsenal, we've launched our new partnership with Paris Saint-Germain to enhance tourism and investment promotion. On conservation, we also attained 30% forest coverage of our land, which was attained ahead of schedule, and we celebrate that as well. We've firmly moved forward on our journey of healing, rebuilding, and developing our nation. We're doing so with a renewed sense of hope and resilience, along with the support of key partners, friendly nations, and by collaborating with international organizations, such as the Commonwealth. Rwanda's accession to the Commonwealth in 2009, only the second country to be admitted without any colonial or constitutional links to the UK, was testament to the progress that Rwanda had made and strides it continues to make towards meeting its development goals. For the last decade, Rwanda has been an active member of the Commonwealth, and as mentioned in June 2020, Kigali will host the next Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Our ambition for CHOGM 2020 is to bring new energy and focus in responding to the needs of the 2.4 billion citizens of our Commonwealth. CHOGM's visibility attracts a large pool of institutions, organizations, and companies' interest. We believe this is another opportunity to present Rwanda to the Commonwealth, offer better perspectives on our journey so far, and seal more partnerships for the benefit of our Commonwealth as we recommit to sharing best practices to benefit our people and our planet. To conclude, as we now look ahead to Vision 2050 and our determination for sustained economic growth, we appreciate the need for continued investment to ensure we can deliver modern livelihoods, modern infrastructure, and most importantly, a high standard of living for all Rwandans. Rwanda's progress on income growth, healthcare, gender equality, safety, security, and education are matched by independent surveys that ask Rwandans how they feel about the country's future. Of course, there's still work to be done, but Rwandans have clarity of where we're going and are determined to get there, combining efforts in order for all our citizens to live with the dignity they deserve. The government of Rwanda remains focused on its results-oriented approach to governance and continues to work diligently to respond to our citizens' needs while contributing to global discussions and actions benefiting the wider world. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much for your words. I wonder if I could start by asking, I have several questions, but I'll ask the first one if possible. Given the history from 1994 onwards, what can other African countries do or learn from Rwanda when it comes to coming out of a violent conflict or violent situation, when it comes to post-conflict reconstruction, but also economic growth? Rwanda has done really well and is always being flagged as an example, but what can other African countries do that could push them or put them on a better path? I know there are other countries, but are there sort of things that you could think of that you'd give advice to other countries on this?
Thank you. We have something to share. We have lots to share. Our story, how we got to where we are, but we're also mindful of the fact that we're learning from others. In fact, one of the reasons we could emerge from conflict is we were embraced by our African brothers and sisters. So we're not here to give lessons. I think that's the first way to a downfall. We are very mindful of the fact that it is in the sharing of the practices that have learned in Rwanda that we can contribute, but also learn from others. I mean, like I said, we've made good inroads into achieving our targets, but we're not there yet. I did mention we have 35% of our population living under the poverty line. So the celebration is short-lived if those are the data that you still have to deal with. What we also have to share with Africa in general is to not lose hope. I think one has to be reminded of Rwanda in '94. I mean, you will recall, some of you will recall, this is a country that was almost written out as a failed state. So had it been that we were listening to the adjectives that were added to an already dark situation of emerging from genocide, we probably would not be where we are. I think it became clear in the leadership that we quickly needed to pick up the pieces and start with the inside work. We've come to learn, and that's something we share often. You know, people can help you if you're already helping yourself. But people will not start helping you before you start helping yourself. And in Rwanda's case, we just quickly started to crawl before we could walk again. But we started. It's in the movement of not keeping idle and not accepting that state of mind that turned the tides for us. And so that's what we share. We share our hope. We inspire others in saying that if Rwanda could pick up the pieces, certainly any other country can, given unity within the country, because you need that. You cannot have half of the population looking this way and the other one looking that way and emerge. And remember, we had a peculiar situation of dealing on one hand with survivors of the genocide. On the other hand, you had perpetrators. And in essence, you needed to speak a language that both could understand and believe in. So that's why I say it's an inward work. You first need to look at the elements that constitute your society. And how do you then find the middle ground to start moving towards a better world? It is hard. And we also say that to everybody who wants to learn from us. It's not easy. You can imagine if we divide this room and we have perpetrators and survivors and we're asking people to move in the same direction. It is not a walk in a park. And it is that realization as well of being honest enough in admitting how hard it is or how hard it was to even have those initial conversations. But we are better off having done that, and we continue to learn. It's always a work in progress. Those who think they have arrived and can then teach the rest of the world how to manage, how to govern, how surprises happen. But I think it's moving with humility and understanding that it's always a work in progress until the last standing citizen is given that dignity to live a dignified life. We're still learning, but so it's not one thing. I'm sorry, I cannot give you. It's not a magical answer. Is one, the belief that it can happen. Two, the belief that you can work with your communities to move towards a better life, and then rolling up the sleeves and starting moving towards that.
So I'm going to open the floor up for questions. So if you could start by introducing yourself and your affiliation, and then just the question. No statements around that, if possible. Ewan.
Thank you very much. Ewan Grant. I'm a former tax inspector who's worked in the EAC, Tanzania, particularly on cross-border tax flows and VAT, anti-fraud measures. My question is, what do you assess, given that you've greatly reduced the reliance on foreign aid, but you've accepted there is still some, and there has been some recently. What do you think, which aid programs have been particularly effective, which haven't? What lessons are there for the visitors for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and how does that fit in with Rwanda's relations with new trade partners, particularly China, Russia in view of recent ministerial visit, and the Israeli Prime Minister's 40th anniversary visit in 2006?
We'll go with the first one. So, which and around 8. So, which ones have been successful? Which haven't?
So on this one, I think it's not one program, but I will say that what worked for us is talking to the partners, the DFIDs and USAID, through their governments, and convincing them to channel their funds through the national budget. Because that's always key. Because where we get it wrong, oftentimes, is you almost have parallel governments working within a state. You have the government that is, with its very meager funds, trying to do things. Then you have a plethora of NGOs running the show. You'll agree with me. So what we did is we started very early, and we said to the donor community, we said, here is a plan. If you want to work with us, here is a plan. And of course they had conditions. Transparency, it's taxpayers' money, we understand that. But we worked with them in ensuring that there will be transparency in how the money is being spent. Because we were very clear that there was no way that the government would have this vision to implement and money would be flowing in and out of the country, but going to NGOs that decided, we don't like this and we'll go. And that's the problem. To have a government that could be courageous enough to push back. And for those who may remember those times, we got pushbacks. Because in essence, you're taking some of the tourists' money away from the NGO community. I mean, you will agree, some of the NGO communities, not all of them, the majority are good ones, but you also have a pool of them that are not working for the benefit of the citizens of the country.
Yes,
and
that many times.
Yes, and so that was a difficult conversation, because they also have their lobbies in their capitals pushing for the funds. So why don't we focus on this negative one thing on Rwanda, so that we scare everybody and we stop the process? The courageous leadership that we had pushed back and said, the only one truth. And the one truth is, if you are here to help us move away from a 95% reliance on foreign aid to where we're supposed to be, then here is the plan. Take it or leave it. And, at times you have to, it's those difficult decisions and conversations I was talking about. It's not easy, but you have to start with a vision. What is the vision you have for your country? And then work towards that. Like I said, it's not perfect, but to answer your question, I think that is the solution. How do you use aid effectively is by channeling it through the national budget and working with donor countries on measuring progress and adjusting where adjustment is needed.
Gentleman here.
Hi, my name is Muzemba. I'm a former diplomat for DRC in Nigeria. My question really is, in the last 20 years, Rwanda has been accused of helping or supporting or financing rebel groups or various armed groups in the eastern part of the country. And I'm sure that you're aware of the number of people who have died through the process. My question is, will Rwanda ever accept its responsibility vis-à-vis that situation? They will also bring to book those warlords, one of them, Kunda who is free, a free man in Rwanda today. Will the government be able to take this gentleman to send us back to Congo, because the Congolese government did issue an international warrant of arrest for this particular person, to bring us there, to send him back to Congo to stand for, to respond to the very charge that was being accused, or to send him to the International Criminal Court?
So, thank you for that question. I think that the challenges that our region face are just dire when you think about it. But before I answer your question, let me remind you of the reason Rwanda was ever involved in the DRC. It was in the pursuit of genocidaires that were given safe haven in the DRC. To this day, even after MONUSCO has been in the DRC for more than a decade, if not more, spending $1 billion, that's their budget, their annual budget is $1 billion. They could not uproot the genocidaire factions that created the forces right on our borders. And I grew up in Bukavu, so I know the area very well. And so that is the point of concern. So before we talk about Nkunda and anybody else, we have got to look at what created stability or lack thereof in our region. And for Rwanda's case, for crying out loud, this is a country that right after burying its million citizens needed to fight at the borders with powerful nations harboring rebels who moved with arms, by the way, because they didn't leave their arms in Rwanda. There was a Opération Turquoise set by the French that allowed them to move with all their artilleries and being rearmed on the other side of the border. And for Rwanda to deal with this issue, right when we were trying to do everything that I've described to you today. So Nkunda, unfortunately, is just 1/100th of the problem that we are faced today. I will tell you this. Rwanda is very much interested in carrying the conversation forward and indeed having very healthy bilaterals with the DRC. And we have started only now, last month, where operations to uproot the rebels in that forest have finally are taking place now. But before we talk about Nkunda or anybody else, we need to talk about what is upsetting the government. We're talking about our security. And as you know, as everybody here knows, you cannot talk about any of the things we talk about, tourism and ICT and trade, if you haven't addressed the challenge of security. You know, you see what's happening in the world and how things move quickly when it comes to security. But somehow, when it comes to Rwanda, everybody wants to put in their pilipili and their salt and their sugar and not address the challenge. I mentioned MONUSCO. MONUSCO, $1 billion that they get every year. I don't know if you are a former diplomat, so maybe you know a bit more about the effectiveness in the DRC. We have failed to understand because they cannot secure anything near our borders. They cannot secure the populations you've talked about. So here is where we are. You know, Rwanda is a small player, and all we want is peace with our neighbors, peace within. But if we have neighbors that are creating problems for ourselves, the first instinct is to protect ourselves. And unfortunately, that's the situation we are in.
My name is Najla Mubarak. I work for the Embassy of Morocco. Your Excellency, you mentioned earlier the reform of education, and I just wanted to know how easy or actually hard was it to shift from French to English as a second language, and how much do you think it participated to this emergence?
Thank you. So the language shift was hard. It's not easy. But we needed to make a strategic decision because right after the genocide, our immediate market was the East Africa community. And that was very much linked to the troubles in the DRC. So traditionally, Rwanda was looking into the Central African states. And now we had this blockade at our border, and we quickly needed to refocus our attention. And for that, we needed a force, a labor force that could be at least bilingual, but quickly needed to absorb English. And so we started introducing English into our educational system. It has had its ups and downs, because in essence you're asking teachers who are trained in French to teach in English. And so the initial years were quite difficult, but we worked with our partners, the UK included, to work towards that challenge. We also looked into the East Africa community, so teachers from Uganda, Kenya, Zimbabwe have played their role, but it's a difficult shift. It's a difficult shift initially, but we are now celebrating that, because we are now turning into a bilingual labor force. So language, yes, it's hard to adjust, but I think you and I are multilingual. It's never impossible, but when you talk about the structure of education, it's hard, but it was, and the strategic location of Rwanda, we're right there in between East and Central Africa. Central Africa is Francophone, and East Africa is Anglophone. So it made sense for us to adopt those two languages. And for now, it's working.
My name is Jaspal Singh. I'm from Singapore. I know very little about Rwanda. So first of all, I thank you for your wonderful speech. I think it was extremely educational for me. Thank you for that. My question is, you mentioned that Rwanda has moved from a dependency on foreign aid for developmental purposes from about 70 or 80 or 90% down
95.
From 95% down to 16%, which is a very, very commendable achievement. The question I have is, today, how much of the investment, the 84% that you have, which is coming from non-donor aid, is from indigenous sources, as opposed to foreign aid, foreign investment? And for the foreign investment, which are the main countries from which it comes from? And in which sectors is it focused?
For the foreign, okay. Yes. So we have about 16% that's still coming from pure aid. Then we have another 17% that's coming from loans. And then the remaining is distributed 55% foreign direct investment, 45% domestic revenues. And we're trying to tilt that. We understand that it's better to gain the most from your local industries, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. It's only we've done the reforms, the business reforms, but we're hopeful on two fronts. We're hopeful on the high value export that we're receiving, and tourism included, of course. And we are also we've expanded our tax base, which is now giving us the revenues that we need. We also, in terms of the countries that are our main partners, the US comes first as on foreign direct investment. We then have the United Kingdom as the second one. Then the EU, Germany, mostly Germany and then Belgium. India is picking up very fast as number 4, and others. We have Israel, and China is number 5 right now. Turkey number 6. So ours is quite varied. We're not overly reliant on one partner versus the other. But I always say Rwanda everything needed to be rebuilt or built. For example, we're building a new airport now with a majority stake from Qatar. We built the convention center with Turkey investment. We are building roads and bridges and creating manufacturers, and there's so much that no one country can claim to take the majority of it all, which is better for us as well. And we're also, which is very exciting, increasing our intra-Africa engagement. So we have more and more African countries that have come in investing, and we will look at the Commonwealth as they come in June to further introduce ourselves to some of the countries that we don't have any bilateral relation with.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. My name is Ade Olopade. I just finished my Masters at King's College. The question I've got is centered on what happens post-President Kagame. Vision 2020, essentially, from my side of things, looks as though it was the thing that changed the context of Rwanda, changed attitudes and behaviors within the country as to individuals dealing with each other, and also how people saw the future. If the president stays for as long as we think he will, what's then the thing that binds the country together? Because he seems to be at the heart of Vision 2020 and the thing that's holding this vision together. So what happens post him? Are there mechanisms that are set up for new forms of leadership to take over? What's the continuity process looking like?
I don't know if you were at King's when the president spoke last week. You were not there. And he started, his first sentence was, none of what was achieved in Rwanda was achieved by one person. And it would be ludicrous to believe that one person could achieve any of this. So, President Kagame has been the face of this for historical reasons. He led the Liberation War and was not interested in politics. Remember, he's an army general. So this was totally by accident. But what he's done is created institutions. I think that's what the leadership has done, was create institutions that are functioning, that could then naturally manage the transition and the next stage of our development. And that's the only way forward. Because my argument with people who say, well, what happens after President Kagame leaves? I said, but why do you want one man or a woman? Why are we not talking about the institutions that could actually sustain the growth? If we are serious about the next stage, then we should talk about institutions. Because if you remain focused on that one person at the top, you will have failed in essence. And he says that. He says if the question becomes who does President Kagame anoint as a successor, then we have failed. Because succeeding in essence means creating a cadre of leaders, of public servants, who will run the show, with or without the person with the caliber of President Kagame at the top. And you and I know we cannot replicate him. I mean, that we're sure we cannot replicate him, unfortunately. For me, we cannot replicate him. So what do? You have to find long-lasting solutions. And that's what we've been focused on in this period, in making sure that institutions are running. We have, if you look at the constitutional cabinets, most are technocrats. We have very few politicians clear politicians that are in charge. But that's, again, so that they can take the vision forward. And so the conversation about who is the president is no longer such a focus. But I always caution people. We came from zero. This is a country just 25 years ago. Remember, if any of you has a 25-year-old, not you, but If you have a 25-year-old, that's someone who still needs guidance. Now I'm talking about a country that lost its people, its economy, its social fabric. So you have to now collate those pieces together to a point where it can even become something that has some frame for you to start moving forward. And this is not a rich country, so we didn't have vast resources that we could just go and, with an ATM card, go and get. We need to work with the donor community to agree on whether we go this way or that way. I mean, that's the reality we are facing. So, I would like to be seated on the other side where it's like, what, we don't like that one. Well, yeah, but our reality is different. And this applies to most countries. The reasons why decisions are made are educated by the context under which that country is living. But I don't agree with the conversation about, so which one is this one more powerful than that one? Is that minister likely to take over? That shouldn't be the conversation. The conversation should be, are the institutions in place so that the cadres of leaders can take over and run the country and sustain the growth.
Brilliant. Just purely because of time, I'm going to bring this to an end. Can you please join me in thanking Her Excellency for being here today? For your